Hi, Grandma Marge here, and today I'm going to start my Christmas baking. And the project for today is to do kolaches. This is a family tradition in our family. Our heritage is pretty much Czechoslovakian, and so this has been a tradition in our family for as long as I can ever remember. And my grandma always had them every holiday. When we went to her house, we would have kolaches. So when she passed on, the family decided somebody needed to learn how to make kolaches, and so because I love making bread anyway, I decided to be the one, at least one of the ones in the family that would do it. And so the first thing that we have to do is prepare the filling. I usually make prune filling for mine, and I have done apricot, and I think that's maybe all, but I think my grandma used to do poppy seed sometimes, and I know that poppy seed is another traditional one in the Bohemian or Czechoslovakian tradition. Okay, so I'm going to prepare my prunes, and so these are the ones that I'm using this year. I got them online through Amazon, Anna and Sarah, and they are fresh. This is the second time I've purchased these from Amazon, and you can just tell by squeezing them in the package that they are extremely fresh. And as I found out in the first package that I did. I won't be using all these today, but I like to prepare the whole package anyway, because I like having them on hand for when I decide it's time to make another batch of kolaches. This is the pan that I'll be cooking them in. Open this package. And just put them in this. I cover them with water. And turn the burner on high to start with, and then after it starts boiling, I'll turn the heat down and just let them simmer for about a half an hour so that they get nice and soft. So this is what they look like while they're simmering, and notice they have absorbed most of the water, a lot of the water. While they're simmering, I put the cover on. That keeps the moisture in there, so the ones that are not fully covered by the liquid will still be getting moisture and won't be hard and dry. And there is some juice on it, so that didn't get absorbed. And we don't throw that away, we save that. This is my 2-quart Tupperware bowl and a strainer. And so I'm going to set that in there, and then spoon these into the strainer and let them drain, because you don't want them to be too moist or too. We're going to set this aside and let it drain, and while we're waiting for it to drain, I'm going to start getting the dough ready. Okay, so now we're gonna chop up our prunes and get them ready to be used. First thing I'm gonna do is move this away from out of that bowl and set it up here and set it out of the way for a bit. And this was the juice that was left in the bottom of the pan. And so I'm going to add this juice to it. I always like to scrape it and get that last little bit out of there. And we'll be using that later. So that's how much juice I got left over, and it works really well for a laxative because it's so concentrated. I'm going to scoop. This is my favorite bread cutting board that I got as a wedding gift 55 years ago. So it has served me well and I love it. Okay, and just put a little bit of this on here. Maybe a little more. And then I'm going to use my ulu knife. This was a gift from a friend and his wife who went to Alaska a few years ago. Chopped as fine as you can. So, and scrape it into this bowl or container. And then do it in another batch. And I just wanted to show you this as well. I'm using the ulu knife. This is probably the one that my grandmother used. So it's very old. I have tried using it, but the two blades, it's like you don't know exactly where it's cutting and it's more confusing. I like the single blade better. But I just think this is neat that I have probably, I can't remember for sure, but it came out of, I think, out of my parents' old house. And so I'm assuming that it is very likely the one that my grandma and my aunt used to use. So I just thought that'd be interesting and I wanted to show it to you. Measure them, pretty much just go by taste. So since I've got 6 cups of prunes there, I'm going to add 1 cup. This is a 1/3 cup measuring cup. So I'm going to put 3 of those in. I'm pretty sure that won't be too much, but it may need some more. And then the cinnamon. Oops, that one doesn't work. So here is, I'm going to put 1 whole teaspoon. This is a half teaspoon, so I got to put 2 of them in there. And again, you don't want to get too much cinnamon, but it kind of adds a little bit to the flavor. Now I need my spoon here. And stir that up. Again, this was a bigger container would work a little easier. In fact, I think I'm going to put it into a bigger container. Well, it looks like I should have used the next size of the nesting bowls, but at least this is a better shape and it should be easier to stir. So let's go this way. Oh yeah, it worked way better. Okay, and I think that's pretty much mixed, so I'm going to just that's good. Yeah. Some people might not like it quite that sweet, but so experiment with it. So I had 6 cups and I put a full cup in, and it's plenty sweet. If you want to start with maybe 2/3 of a cup and taste it, and if you still want it sweeter, add more. But you know, I know some people wouldn't like it as sweet as this is. And now I have to do something with this extra prune filling that I have. And so I think it's probably going to be enough. These 2 containers will hold it. I'll put most of it in here. And as I said, this is my first batch for this Christmas season, so I'll be using a lot of this before Christmas. So just either put it in the fridge or the freezer. I like to scrape everything as close as I can. I remember an elderly lady that pointed out to me that if you don't do that, you end up wasting a lot of food. And so, yeah, if I hadn't, this isn't a huge amount, but if I hadn't scraped it out, there's almost enough for one more kolache. So I've gotten into the habit of every time I clean out a dish, I clean it as closely as I can. Okay, so that's our ball of dough. When I make my kolaches, which is what I'm going to do today, I weigh these out, and I'm fussy, I guess, because I weigh each individual piece of dough. Okay, put it on 0. And each one is going to be in the neighborhood of 1.5 ounces for each kolache, and maybe just a hair more than 1.5. Okay, and I'll put that up here. I've got everything ready here now to form my kolaches and put them in the pan to be ready to bake. So first of all, I have to be sure that I grease the bottom and the sides, because you don't want them to stick any place. Okay, so each of these I'm going to form into, but I'm going to start up here. These have been resting for a little bit, so the dough is a little bit easier to work with, and form it into not a super symmetrical square or anything, but kind of squarish, and make it thinner on the outside edges, leave the dough a little bit thicker in the middle of it. And press it down there. And then use about a heaping teaspoon of filling in each kolache. And you have to excuse me for calling these kolaches because that's what we always call them. Sorry about that. So that one is there. Square. Pinch them together very tightly so they don't come apart, and then stretch it out so that you've got plenty to come over the top, and cover it and pinch that together so it won't come apart, and then pinch these corners so that they won't leak in the pan. One more here. There's my square with the hump in the middle. A heaping teaspoon of filling. Opposite corners together. And then the other opposite corners, after you stretch it out a bit, pull them over the top, pinch it together so it doesn't come apart. Pinch your other little corners together, and there is a kolache. So I'm going to set them aside for right now, and remember I have these other little buns here. So to start with, I'm going to just spray the pan. And make little balls of dough. And this is how I would form my dinner rolls as well. Okay. Flatten them out just a little bit. And these are just going to rise like that for now, and eventually I'll put the prune filling in them. The next thing I'm going to do is put on a pan of hot water and let it come to a boil, and then I'll be putting the bread, the kolaches, on the top shelf in the oven, and set the pan of boiling hot steamy water underneath them on the bottom with the oven turned off, and close the door, and that provides a nice warm, moist environment for these to rise, and that way with that moisture in there, the tops of them don't crust over, and so they're free to rise to their full potential. And the more they rise, the softer they are when you're eating them. Okay, you can see that our water is boiling to put in the oven. Remember that the oven is turned off. It isn't for this step, so we're going to put the big pan in there, and the other one right next to it. And this water we're going to set down here, so it's going to be in the middle, and the steam is going to surround everything that's in there. Okay, so that's 30 minutes, and after 30 minutes I'll take them out of the oven and they'll have another 10 or 12 minutes while the oven heats up to the right temperature, another 10 or 12 minutes to rise while they're sitting out on the counter. Okay, so that's all for another half an hour. Mine is a convection oven, and so generally you need to lower the heat a little bit from what most recipes say. And so I'm going to set it at 340. And now, while we're waiting for the oven to heat up, I'm going to finish with these. What we need to do is make an indentation in each one. And then we're going to put the filling in. And once again we'll do about a heaping teaspoon of it. Maybe a little bit more. That one, that's a little bit bigger. That one too. So I have to tell you that I'm not used to making them this way, so they may not turn out the way they're supposed to, but I'm trying. Okay, the oven is heated. And I set the timer for 10 minutes because I think those flatter ones will be done in 10 minutes. Okay, we're going to call that good enough. They look very good. Better than the last time I tried this. And I'm going to move this into the center of the oven. Okay, the timer went off. Ooh, and they're looking nice and brown. And so there they are. So now I'm going to tip it over onto the cooling rack. And I have marks on the tops of them, so I put the second cooling rack there, flip it over, and there they are. So now they will cool. I'll leave them like that until they cool to almost room temperature. And then I'll wrap them in foil for the freezer.